Okay, hi class. How's it going? Has everybody stayed up way too late and is now convinced half the country's a moron? Okay, I'm not saying that that's the take-home message that you should have, but so long as everybody's equally frustrated, yay for us. Oh my gosh. Anyways, every election I tell myself, like, you know what? I'll just, like, watch the news and I'll go to bed at a normal human time and I'll wake up in the morning, and every year I'm like, nope. Sorry. But you're here, this is good, right? I probably shouldn't say who said this, but there was, and you can fill it, it's perhaps obvious who said it. There was one former campaign advisor, whomever, was like, if the other candidate wins, I probably shouldn't have this on video, but if other major candidate wins, next thing you know, everybody is going to have, I believe the phrase was, perverse cow sex. Just like, you know, sleep with cows all the time. It's like, whoa, buddy. Like, I can believe that there can be weird things go down if candidate A versus B wins, but I don't think that that's the big concern you should have, anyways. But we're all here. I was trying to figure out something that would be, like, psychologically helpful, but since this is what I do, I'm just gonna keep yapping away at where we're at, but let me know if we need, like, a break or something. There's, like, a freakishly adorable video at the end, but it's actually useful, so we'll just go ahead. Okay, so we're on to a new chapter, and we've hinted at this, so you've seen it. It's been foreshadowed in the other chapters, but right now, we're actually here. Mendel, when he was doing his work, he didn't know what the heritable factors were, right? They could have been a lipid, it could have been a protein, it could have been part of the membrane, it could have been who knows what, right? Some chunk of something. Now, we know, we can show, like, look, it's the gene. We can find the gene on a chromosome, we can be like, look, boom, there it is. You can actually legitimately just, you can tag genes on chromosomes. Ah! Is this frozen? Oh my goodness. There we go. Hi. Makes sense. And I check, I'm like, oh yeah. You can tag, like, that one's tagged for a gene there. You're like, hey, it's there. Cool. So, Mendel comes up with all these patterns of heredity. And in the 1870s, there are a bunch of scientists a few scientists who were working on looking at cells under microscopes, right? And they'll stain them for chromosomes, and they see things like this. And they draw some truly beautiful pictures. Like, they're looking at their own kind of terrible microscope, and then they're drawing a picture. Anyways, they see this whole meiosis and mitosis thing happen. And so, at the turn of the century, I guess, about 1902, scientists realized, you know what? This pattern of inheritance that Mendel's seeing, the way these chromosomes are behaving, it looks really, really similar. It looks like this makes a lot of sense for this to be the heritable factor. You'd have something like this then. So this is the idea, and this is right, by the way, so let's stay with it. Where, if you're looking at one of Mendel's kind of crosses, where you've got something like true breeding yellow round peas, right? And you cross that with these green wrinkled seed peas, right? When each of these plants gives a gamete, so when you cross these to the next generation, you'd have one gamete that looks like that from one parent, and the other one like that from the other parent. We can see that, for this example, we've got homologous chromosomes, right? This chromosome is homologous to this chromosome, right? They're both carrying the R gene on them. And in this true breeding case, they're both carrying the dominant R. Over here with this P, you've got two chromosomes that are homologous, each carrying the R trait, or the R gene. And this one's, it's double recessive. You've got two copies of the recessive R. Cool. Then when you cross these, when you make each gamete, this pea plant can only make this type of gamete, where you have one of these homologous chromosomes, one of these homologous chromosomes, and over here you can only make one type of gamete, where you have one chromosome that has R in it, one chromosome that has Y in it. Since everything's recessive, you got recessive, right? Then, and sorry, I realized suddenly everything happens. When going back up. When those two gametes come together to form the new individual, it's going to have one little y, one big y, one big R, one little r. So what's the phenotype of this F1 plant going to be? What's it going to look like? It's going to be heterozygous, right? So it's going to have a heterozygous genotype, and it's going to look yellow and round, right? Because we got the round dominant allele and the yellow dominant allele, and we got a copy of each recessive, but there we are. So it's going to look like this. We're cool? Great. If this crosses with itself, so this one crosses with this, we can get some funky things happening, right? We end up with all sorts of different things. And this so these little pea plants going through meiosis looks a lot like Mendel's law of segregation and his law of independent assortment. Because the alleles for the non-homologous genes are going to assort independently, meaning you could line up these chromosomes like this, or you could line them up like that, right? And so when you do that, you end up either here or here, right? And the two alleles, so that's the independent assortment. You can end up with things like this. If you've got the two alleles separating, right, which you do, you can have the two alleles separating. That accounts for segregation. Do we see this? So how chromosomes are behaving looks so much like how inheritance works. And it actually is how inheritance works. But in the 1900s, it was just like, wow, it's beautiful. This would be beautiful if it was the case. But we don't actually, at the time, they didn't actually know. Because, maybe there's some heritable factor that's, hanging out on the cell membrane. Maybe that's what it is, and these chromosomes are just, dividing this way just to be cool. Who knows, right? So, yeah. So, the clinching evidence for chromosomes are legitimately, absolutely what's doing inheritance was from a scientist named Thomas Morgan. He was working in fruit flies, right? Anything that we like about fruit flies if we want to do genetic experiments? There are a couple things I'm good from. They have tons of offspring. You know this if you've ever accidentally left a cooler with a banana in it for a while and come back and be like, oh, dagnabbit, right? Fruit flies can have tons of offspring. They breed quickly, right? Going from baby fruit fly to old fruit fly is super fast, right? You can have a generation every 2 weeks. They also only have 4 pairs of chromosomes. And so if you're trying to keep track of things, 4 pairs of chromosomes are just so beautiful, right? Because of these reasons, flies are really popular in biology as example organisms. You'll usually hear it called Drosophila or Drosophila melanogaster. It's just science for fruit fly, okay? Is there a lot of music suddenly? Cool. I'm gonna go close the door. Thank you. Okay, so Morgan's working with fruit flies. He's also got a undergraduate student who's working with him, and I need to look up the quote, but his undergrad student, I find the student's name and I'll look up the quote. Totally has this beautiful quote that's like, so I was working on this, and I totally blew off my physics homework or something to get this done. I'm like, well, go you. Anyways, so they're looking at these, and Morgan notices that, okay, in our fruit fly, also this is kind of creepy, I realize, but he notices in his fruit flies, typically, normally, just generally, these flies had red eyeballs, okay? Red eyeballs, cool. He called that type that just normally showed up in the population, just typically, he called that the wild type, as in the type I'd expect to see in the wild, right? Called it wild type. Also called normal. This doesn't mean it has to be better, it has to be worse, it just means, yep, that's the one we see typically. We're cool with that? The trait that was the alternate version that sometimes showed up but wasn't very common, he called the mutant type, or the mutant phenotype. And this isn't like X-Men level mutant, it's just like, it's the other one. So far, so good? Can we all just take a moment to appreciate that they went through thousands of fruit flies, and that there were probably underpaid, overworked undergrads who were like looking at fruit flies being like, what color eyeballs do you have? As their job, over and over. The other thing, so like, I call myself a biologist. They also were checking things like the sex of the fruit fly. I have no idea how you can tell. Like, you can hand me a fruit fly and be like, is the boy fruit fly or a girl fruit fly? I'd be like, no idea. Probably yes. Right? Anyways, but there they were. So they're looking at fruit flies. Also, I feel like we just need to take a moment to appreciate science. I knew somebody who worked in a fruit fly lab. That is a hard phrase to say, especially for people who say it to 3. Anyways, and if you're using other organisms in biology, if you're using, say, mice or guinea pigs, you know exactly how many you have, and they're all, like, numbered, sometimes named, and you, like, keep track of everything and have, like, the little mice terrarium things going on, right? If you use fruit flies, you just have, like, this, like, terrarium thing full of fruit flies, and when you go in to get some, you're like, yeah, you're gonna lose a few. And the labs that are next door to your fruit fly lab do not like you. They're like, dog nabba. And they get, like, the little fly catcher papers, and they have, like, Venus flytraps, and like, you people. Yeah. Anyways. So taking a moment to appreciate all that, and then, anyways, Morgan's looking at these wild type and these mutant phenotype flies. Cool. And he's looking, is it really, are the chromosomes the thing that's holding that heritable factor? Right? Just so we know where we are with class. Today and Friday we're going to talk about, yes, chromosomes are the thing that's holding that heritable factor. Next week, we're looking at, what is that stuff? Next week we're going to look at DNA as like a thing. And then, like the last week of class, which is bizarre that we're that close, we're going to look at how do you get from DNA to having fancy-dancy proteins. So that's where we are. Okay, so Morgan has these fruit flies. He's got a whole bunch that are wild type. He has a whole bunch that are mutants type. And he does what looks like a super standard Mendelian kind of experiment, where he takes male flies that have white eyes, so male flies with mutants type, right? And he crosses those with red-eyed female flies. So far, so good, right? Not a big deal. White-eyed males, red-eyed females, crosses those. All the little baby flies, all the F1 generation of baby flies, they all have red eyes. Does that shock us? Not really, right? Is red eye dominant or recessive to white eyes? Yeah, right? Like, you've seen this before. You're like, okay, yeah, so you have white eyes, you have red eyes, all the kids look like this. presumably the red eyes is dominant. The mom has 2 different copies of it. The dad has the recessive ones. Boom, right? Everyone's cool with this? Great. So he does that. It's great. He then takes those, that F1 generation cross, and he crosses them with themselves. Again, super normal. We end up with the F2 generation. In the F2 generation, there are 3 red-eyed offspring for every 1 white-eyed offspring. Does this shock us? No, that's what we expect too, right? So far, so good. Everything's great. Where it gets weird, or a little bit weird, is only the males are white-eyed. So he's got. We're gonna stay back. We're just gonna go through the whole thing here. Actually, I have a picture here. This is the picture. You've got this first cross, right? You have an F1 generation. Males and females both having red eyes. The F2 generation, you have the 3-to-1 ratio that you expect, right, with some dominant recessive thing, except all the females red-eyed, half the males white-eyed. Which is kind of weird, right? Let's think about this for a brief moment. I realize you don't know that much about, like, the sex life of flies, but do you think that there's some, like, I don't know, environmental factor that, like, female flies are socialized differently with other female flies, and they're more likely to have their eyeballs turned red or something? Okay, she's raising one eyebrow at me saying, don't make up crap. Okay. Is there some, again, I don't know flies' secondary male characteristics all that well, is there something about being male that makes white eyes, like, appear? Can't really be the thing because, like, this is something you see as soon as you see the fly, right? Does this bug anybody a little bit? Yeah, it bugged them, and they're like, okay, we're going to figure this out. Also, as we're working on figuring this out, just for convention, does everybody know what this symbol means in biology? It's supposed to be Mars with a shield and, like, some stabby pokey bit, I don't know, I think a spear or something behind it. It's supposed to be male, it's supposed to be a symbol for Mars. The symbol over there is the symbol for Venus. It's supposed to represent female. It's supposed to be a looking glass. In biology, you'll see those symbols just as biological male, biological female. We're cool with this? Okay, so before I go on, a couple things that we're just paying attention to. It looks like red eyes are definitely dominant. White eyes definitely appear recessive. The ratios just overall are right? 3-to-1, that's right. But something funky is going on with the male versus female thing. So what they worked out was this, and it's not as complicated as it looks. Really, I promise it's not as complicated as it looks. What's going on is the female fly, and so this is the P generation. Female flies, well, all female flies, are going to have 2 X chromosomes. 2 copies of them. Great. And for these red-eyed flies that they had in the P generation, they had 2 copies of X, the X chromosome. And this female was homozygous for the wild type. The wild type is represented by this W+. Actually, it's by the plus, but this one's the wild type, saying red eyeballs here. Okay? The only when this female goes through meiosis, the only option for what chromosome she's giving of this X chromosome is this X1 that has the wild type on it. She could give either this one or this one, but they both have the wild type gene on it. So far, so good? So she's giving this chromosome here. The male, he has white eyes. So he has no copy of the dominant allele. He doesn't have a dominant copy of the allele at all, right? And normally if you show a recessive trait, you have 2 copies of the recessive, right? The male has 1 copy of the recessive, right here on his X chromosome. And his Y chromosome is much smaller, and the Y chromosome does not have the eye-color gene, period. It's not that it has a recessive version or a dominant version, it just doesn't have a version. Are you cool with that? So, when the dad gives this chromosome, he gives the X chromosome, he's giving the recessive allele. When he gives the Y chromosome, he's not giving an allele for this. Do we see that? So, in this first generation, dad either gives the mutant type, the white-eyed allele, or he gives a Y chromosome, right? This cross right here, is this a male or a female? Female, yeah. An X chromosome from mom, an X chromosome from dad. This individual's female, right? Female has red eyes. Mom gave that red-eyed dominant allele, right? This individual over here, this one also has red eyes, got that dominant red-eye allele off the X chromosome from mom. What did this guy get from dad? Did he get a white-eyed allele? He didn't. He got the Y chromosome. That's why he's male, right? But he only has 1 allele, this thing now. Do we see this? This is also just for organisms that work this way with sex. The humans are like this too. It's the male that determines the sex of the offspring, which would have probably been nice for the wives of King Henry VIII. You're aware of this story, right? King Henry VIII is like, I would like a son for an heir. And I'm going to keep murdering my wives until I get a son for an heir. He's like, listen, buddy. First of all, this is not a healthy relationship. Second of all, it's your fault in the first place. Anyways, can we also take a moment to realize that it would be a really weird dynamic to be like Queen Elizabeth and be like, Dad totally murdered Mom, right? Like, that would be a weird familial dynamic. Anyway, sorry, moving on. We've got the F1 generation, they're all red-eyed. Cool. Then, when that F1 generation crosses with itself, you end up with this funky, well, the normal 3-to-1 ratio, but the funky half the males are red-eyed, half the males are white-eyed. Because the females, the mother now, is either going to give this dominant X allele, or she's going to give the recessive X allele. Those are the 2 options. Either one's equally likely. Cool. Dad is either going to give the dominant X allele, or he's going to give the Y allele. Right? So over here, you get dominant X allele for mom, for red eyes, boom. Red eyes, right? Red eyes female. And you're female because you got 2 X chromosomes. Yeah? Here, this one's female as well, right? You got an X chromosome from dad, you got an X chromosome from mom. Mom gave you the mutant type allele, the recessive allele, but dad gave you his X chromosome as well, and that X chromosome that he gave you, that one's got the dominant allele on it, so you're also red-eyed, right? If mom gives the X chromosome that has the dominant red-eyed allele to offspring, and dad gives the Y, this is a son, and this son has red eyes. If mom gives this allele, this X chromosome that has the recessive allele on it, and dad gives the Y, this is also male, and this male has white eyes. Do we see that? Is everyone okay with how this is working? Yeah? Theoretically, is it possible to ever have a female fruit fly that has white eyes? should we look at what happens if, hi, I want people, I think you can see me okay. What happens if you cross this female with this male? Right? Should we just look at this step? If you cross this female with this male, and this female gives this chromosome that has a recessive allele, and you were to get this one, and you'd have two X's, right? An X chromosome, would be female. You'd have the recessive. She'd have white eyes, right? You okay with that? This would have white eyes. And then the other daughter, I'm assuming they have 4 children, the other daughter would have red eyes, right? Let's look at the sons. The sons here, you'd have this son, which would have white eyes, and this son would have red eyes. You'd end up with half and half. You'd have half the children with red eyes, half the children with white eyes, half the males with white eyes, half the females with white eyes, right? You could do it, but in this breeding experiment, you're showing up with with only white-eyed males because of how this is linked. Are we okay with this? Great. So sex-linked genes are going to have slightly different patterns of inheritance. The rules are going to be the same Mendelian rules plus complicated bits that happened before. They're still there, but you're going to see some interesting things happen. So humans and most other mammals, you've got the this chromosomal determination of sex, right? 2X is female, XY male. There are some interesting other options. So like if you're triple X, or if you're X and don't have a Y, we're gonna ignore that for right now. Alright, I need to take a hint. There are other options. So there are options. This is us, right? So it's called the XY system. Oh, while I'm here, the other chromosomes that aren't the sex-determining chromosomes, super important. They're doing all sorts of things. They're doing digestion. They're doing muscle formation. They're doing a whole bunch of stuff, right? But it's really easy to see the sex-linked ones. So human male up here has 44 chromosomes plus an X and a Y. Cool. Human female has 44 chromosomes plus 2 X chromosomes. Great. When this human female makes an egg, she's going to get put 22 chromosomes plus an X. When this human male makes a chromosome, he's going to put 22 chromosomes plus either an X or a Y. And then if an egg comes together with one that has X, you're going to get a female. If the egg comes together with one that has a Y, you're going to get a male. Cool. There are other options too. So little grasshopper buddies. Females are going to have 22 chromosomes plus 2 X's, right, which looks normal. Males are going to have 22 chromosomes plus an X, and then just blank, just not the other chromosome. Chickens are interesting. They're going to use the ZW system, where the female is the sex that has 2 different chromosomes here. Also, chickens have a freakishly large number of chromosomes. They've got 76 plus the X plus the ZW, so they've got 78 chromosomes going on. Anyways, so in chickens, it's the mother who's determining the sex, right? So dad is only giving a Z always, and mom is either giving a Z or a W. Bees have this weird haploid-diploid thing going on, where females are expecting them to be diploid with 32 chromosomes, and males are going to be haploid with 16. It gets exciting. There's all sorts of options. But for us today, we're looking at this XY system. Everyone's feeling good about this? There's a common misconception that, and this picture is going to make it worse, so sorry here, people. There's a common misconception that, like, hey, look, the X chromosome looks like an X, and the Y chromosome looks like a Y. But No. All the chromosomes except the Y chromosome, when they're condensed and ready to split, they all look like the X chromosome there. They've got two homologous, so they've got sister chromatids, they come together, right? They're not called that because of the shape, okay? It's just called that because people's naming conventions. Alright? We're okay with this? Great. And you'll notice, back when you saw regular the other chromosomes, like chromosome 1 is really, really long, chromosome 2 is really long, chromosome 3, etc. And they have tons and tons of genes on these chromosomes, like lots of things, right? A given chromosome, so if you have 46 chromosomes, right? There are lots of things going on in your body, so every chromosome is packed full of information, right? On the same chromosome, you might have something for, like, lipid digestion, and toenail formation, and eye color, and earwax consistency, and eyebrow growth rate, and all the things, right? Okay. The Y chromosome is little bitty. It doesn't have, it has genes on it, but it doesn't have tons and tons and tons of genes on it. It mostly has, well, I've got slides. What the Y chromosome has on it mostly is a gene called the SRY, the sex-determining region on the Y, which is a boring but convenient way to name it, because you're like, yep, that's what it is. And this gene is basically responsible for testes developing in the embryo. And if that happens, a whole series of events are going to happen. So you're going to end up with more testosterone in the system, you'll end up with secondary male characteristics, a whole bunch of things will happen. Fair enough? When a human female is undergoing meiosis, her chromosome 1s meet together, her homologous chromosome 1s meet together to split apart, 2, 3, 4, all the way down, her two X's meet up, they're homologous, they meet up, and then they're separated. When human males are undergoing meiosis, their chromosome 1s find their homologous chromosome 1 buddy, chromosome 2 finds its homologous chromosome 2 buddy, on and on. X and Y, even though they look different, they've got little bits on the end that match. So chromosome X and chromosome Y find each other, and they're basically the homologous pair there. We're okay with this? They can find each other in meiosis. So, we're doing okay in time. So unlike chromosome 1, there are a ton of different genes, right? So there are some genes for protein formation for the gut. Sorry, we're still on chromosome 1. And there's some for, like, skin stretchiness and all sorts of stuff, right? I don't even know what's on chromosome 1. Tons of things in chromosome 1. On the X chromosome, there are a ton of different genes. Lots and lots of genes. And they happen to be on the X chromosome. Genes that show up on the X chromosome are called X-linked genes. This gene doesn't have to have anything to do with sex at all. It's just on the same chromosome that's related to sex. We're okay with this? They're genes that are located on the Y chromosome are called Y-linked. I mean, if they're located on either X or Y, they're called sex-linked. If they're located on the Y chromosome, they're called Y-linked. There aren't very many of those just because the Y chromosome is short. So, yeah. Most Y-linked genes do have to do with sex determination because most of the Y chromosome is about sex determination. The X chromosome does all sorts of stuff. So, thinking about things. Does anybody off the top of their head, you don't have to, but does anybody off the top of their head know if color blindness is more common in men or women, typically? Men, right? Is that so just for the record, there are all sorts of interesting things that happen with environment and genes coming together, right? Like a whole bunch of socialization stuff, all the things. Do we think that color blindness has something to do with, like, little girls are encouraged to know different shades of pink? It's coral, it's periwinkle, it's rose, I don't know, different shades of pink. And little boys are like, it's pink. Is that why we're seeing this color blindness difference? No? Is it because there's something about being male, like, I don't know, additional testosterone production that maybe, like, doing something weird to the eyeballs? Maybe, right? But it doesn't... Maybe. Or... We'll get to just that. But females can be colorblind, right? Like they can. It's just not nearly as common. We're going to see this. Okay. We're going to ignore Y-linked genes just because there aren't that many. X-linked genes get interesting because so Y-linked things, you're never expecting females to have these because you're expecting females to not have any Ys at all. X-linked, these things show up in males and females because both males and females are going to have at least an X. Right? Okay. So, for a regular, just any boring old chromosome, recessive trait, right? Something like eye color, or earwax consistency, or the albinism trait, right? To have the recessive trait, you need a recessive from mom and a recessive from dad. So you have to be homozygous recessive, right? That's normal. If you've got an X-linked recessive trait, females, to show that X-linked recessive trait, you need to have that recessive trait from mom. So the X chromosome that mom gave you needs to have that recessive allele on it. And the X chromosome you got from dad also needs to have that recessive trait on it. It looks just like normal, regular, recessive dominant inheritance. You need to be homozygous recessive to show the recessive trait. Males, to show the recessive trait for an X-linked gene, you only need one copy of the allele. Because mom gives you the X chromosome, and dad gives you the Y. So the Y doesn't have a dominant or recessive version to cover at all. So if you have one recessive allele, you have the recessive trait. Does that make sense? We're seeing that okay? Questions? Alright, you all are apparently a fast class, or just don't care. But you're here. No, sorry. I'm going to talk through this, and then I have a video, so I'll let the online people go. So here we're looking at this chart of all the things. We've got, what's shown in this is the X and Y chromosomes are shown as X's and Y's. These individuals also have a ton of other chromosomes, okay? We're just not showing them all because it's hard. The alleles that we're looking at, the dominant or recessive alleles, they're going to be shown as letters, just like normal, where capital letters indicate dominant and recessive indicate, and lowercase indicate recessive. And so some version like this, where dad is, it's called hemizygous recessive. So homozygous recessive would be where you have two copies of the recessive one. He's hemizygous recessive because he's recessive, but there's only one shown because the Y is the other thing. When these cross, mom is giving everybody, all the kids, an X with the dominant allele. Everybody has this dominant X from mom, right? None of them are showing whatever this pink trait is, though the two girls are carriers for it. Do you see that? The two girls each have the allele for it. They're both carriers for it. Neither of the sons are carriers for it. Right? Because they got the dominant from mom, and they didn't get a recessive from dad. They got the Y from dad. The girls are carriers because they got the dominant from mom, and they got the recessive from dad. Right? And then, if you were to cross these two, for instance, to cross this carrier, right? You're crossing this girl who's a carrier for whatever pink trait, and this male who is not a carrier for it, right? Neither of these individuals show the trait. You have, and you end up with neither of the girls have the trait, right? Because they both got this X chromosome from dad that had the dominant allele. But one son does have it, right? But if you were to cross a carrier female with a male who actually has it, you end up with this interesting combination where you have one daughter who's a carrier, one daughter who has it, one son who isn't a carrier but doesn't have it, and one son who has it. Do you see that pattern? It's not as tricky as it looks. I have a video for you online, people. Please find this video. Let me stop the recording and then we'll watch this.